Hey, this is Ben from Ready.Set.Van. Today we're going to be doing Sprinter versus Promaster, which is going to be kind of fun. On my left, I've got a 144 Sprinter, and on my right over here, I've got a 159 Promaster. What's great about this is both of these vans have our Basecamper layout installed in them. There are a lot of differences on the layout because each, the buildable volume is different on both vans. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the differences in capabilities, in particular all-wheel drive on the Sprinter, and whatever else comes up. So let's get into it. So without question, the biggest difference between these two chassis is the drivetrain. The Promaster is just front-wheel drive, and the Mercedes is available in all-wheel drive. I think it's important to think about what your actual use case is and what you can expect based on being two-wheel drive or being all-wheel drive. Because the fact is, in my experience, 99% of the people out there have no real need for all-wheel drive, but they just sort of think they need it. I will tell you, with the Promaster, especially if you put a set of tires on them, it will go places that you that you wouldn't expect. Certainly with my van, I've sort of tried to push the limits of that. There are things you absolutely can't do though with a Promaster. You can't go in deep sand. Don't do that. You'll regret it. Ask me how I know. And you can't go in mud. Any kind of soft, low traction environment, this is more likely to sink in. So don't do those things. But most people, in my experience, really are trying to make sure that their van has the capability to go to deep into the national parks, down some of those dirt roads and Forest Service roads. And in my experience, you're not gonna have a problem with that at all. You could take a Honda Accord down there, probably. Any of that stuff, the Promaster is going to do great. Put a set of tires on it, you'll get better grip. I drive my van in the snow all the time. Well, back when it snowed, and it does great. So I'll give you some data from our business. So we've built about 140 vans at this point. We've heard from 2 people out of that 140 that have gotten back to us and said that they'd wish they'd built on a Mercedes and not a Promaster. They still love their van. They just, wanted to go down some trails that they couldn't go down otherwise. So most people don't need it. But all-wheel drive is great. One of the main downsides to getting the Mercedes over the Promaster is it's going to cost more. The van costs more. If you get all-wheel drive, that adds some more. Still, some people argue also that the cost of ownership on a Mercedes is a little bit higher. I think that's overblown, personally, and I think it's offset by the fact that I think a Mercedes will hold value a little bit better than a Promaster. Although I don't have any evidence for that, so it just kind of feels like that seems to be the sentiment anyway. One of the other things about the Mercedes that is super nice is there is just a ton of aftermarket accessories for the Mercedes that exist, but not nearly in the same magnitude as they do for the Promaster. So if you're somebody who wants to lift the van and put a bumper on the front and expedition boxes and the whole 9 yards, then there's a lot more available to you on the Sprinter than there is on the Promaster platform. That said, that stuff is expensive, so just be prepared for that. So let's talk about the dimensional differences that exist between these two vans. First off, they are both under 20 feet. Promaster is, I think, about 2 inches less than 20 feet, and the Sprinter is about 6 inches less than 20 feet. And the reason I keep talking about 20 feet is because 20 feet is a standard American parking space. So these both fit. They use up pretty much the whole space, but they fit real nice in a parking space, which is great. The moment you go a little bit bigger, then that sort of changes. So these are both a great size for, getting around town, being able to park it. You can park them on a meter. It's not too bad. The Sprinter is about 6 inches taller, and that's mostly because the whole chassis rides higher. And actually, it's a pretty noticeable difference between the two vans getting in and out. So the floor height, like the floor of the home inside, is actually 32 inches off the pavement. In a Promaster, it's only 22 inches off the pavement. So it's a lot easier hopping in and out of a Promaster than it is hopping in and out of a Mercedes. So if you have bad knees or you don't like climbing in and out of things, that's something to consider. You can always get steps and things like that, or running boards, which are very, very helpful, but something to consider. So the most important difference is the difference in buildable volume. And so if you look at the Promaster here, our build starts right about here at the slider door and goes to the back. Same on the Sprinter. And you can tell just by looking at them that the Promaster has more space there than the Sprinter does. Sprinter actually has 10 inches less length in that build area. And the Sprinter is also 4 inches more narrow in that build area. That's pounded by the fact that the Sprinter tapers when it gets to the top, whereas the ProMaster is kind of like a boxier, square cargo area. So you combine those three factors, and you're looking basically like a 15% less buildable volume in the Sprinter versus in the ProMaster. So it's a pretty big difference. The Basecamper layout that we originally designed for the ProMaster, we now build on the Sprinter as well. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take you in there and we'll kind of compare the two. You can kind of see some of the trade-offs and things that we did to try and shoehorn that layout into the Sprinter. They're both great, but we'll go check it out. So we're in the ProMaster 159 Basecamper right now. This is actually the layout that I launched the company with a bunch of years ago. When I was designing that first layout, I just spent so much time in the van, sitting in all the different seats, trying different things out, working with mock-ups and trying to just really get all of the ergonomics just right. What I love about this layout is it's so open. It's really great for hanging out with 2 or 3. You can kind of do 4 people, but it's just super nice. When I first made the this table, for example, I think the first one was, I think it was 24 inches, and it was fine, but it was just like a little small. And when you actually put like 2 plates on here, you could do it, but you kind of had to move them around a little bit. So what's nice is this is almost 26 inches now, and it really just creates a lot more room to spread out. It just feels better, it just works better. And that's a nice thing about a layout that's like really kind of dialed in from that perspective. Like all of the relationships of all of the things are kind of as they should be. This seat, for example, one of my favorite things to do is just to flip this cushion around and sit here. This is just so nice. It's like if you have the slider door open, or even if it's just the windows cracked, just a nice spot to be. Also, like if you're hanging out and talking to somebody who's sitting in the passenger seat there, actually the camera is sitting in the passenger seat right now, or somebody outside or whatever, or you're just by yourself and you're just kind of working on your laptop here. It's really nice. And this whole layout has really just been really fantastic. My personal van is one of these, and I just love it. So I was a little nervous when we started working on the Sprinter 144 version of the same layout, because I knew that we were going to be working with less space, and I was a little worried about the sacrifices that we were going to have to make. And I wanted to make sure that we were hopefully able to hold true to some of these sort of design values that we had here for the Basecamper, just having enough, open space, good relationships between all of the seating, a beautiful kitchen, just like we have here. I'll show you kind of when we go to the Sprinter, kind of how we change this. But let me show you a couple things in the garage that were kind of key to this original design as well. So a really big functional garage is a key part of every layout we do. When I designed the Basecamper years ago, one of the things I wanted to make sure was that it would take 2 full-size mountain bikes in here, which it does beautifully. But people carry all kinds of things back here. The garage is so essential. It's really where all of the things, all of the goodies that you bring with you that help you do activities or just extra stuff, basically all the things that make your life on the road more fun, end up in the garage. So it's super important. This is nice and big in the ProMaster. When we started doing the Sprinter 144, I was worried about the narrowness and what effect that would have on the garage. So let's go check it out. So here we are at the Sprinter 144 garage, and it definitely feels a little smaller. It definitely is a little smaller. It's 4 inches narrower side to side and about 3 inches shorter front to back. So it's a little bit smaller, but there's still plenty of room here to put stuff. I don't think it's really a concern at all. I was worried about how that might feel, but I think you can really get a lot of stuff in here. The one thing I would say is that if you're planning on putting a mountain bike in here, we're going to need to take some measurements and make sure that that's going to fit, because with the shorter length, it's really going to be bike dependent on whether you can get it in here. But otherwise, I feel very confident that this, doesn't feel like a huge sacrifice in terms of the smaller amount of space. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Let's go check out inside. So here's the inside of the Sprinter 144 Basecamper. I love it. I think it came out great. It definitely does feel smaller. I'll kind of walk you through, we took kind of like a little bit out of everything to kind of make this layout fit as compared to the ProMaster version. But you know, obviously with the bed, it's the same size bed as in the ProMaster. We did have to use obviously flares. We had to put flares in on the outside so that we could get that extra distance. Got to do that in any Sprinter if you want to run the bed sideways. So we got the flares in there that lets us get the bed in side to side. And then, you know, over here, our kitchen is like a little smaller. So one thing with that is, you know, with those few inches gone, we had to switch from a big set of drawers here to this large pantry unit, which honestly I think is great. I love that. You know, this seat here also got a little bit smaller, so there isn't really any extra room here. In the ProMaster, you had like 3 or 4 inches of elbow room here. You can really kind of, you know, spread out. But you can also just put your arm up here, hang out, works just fine. The other thing that's a little different here is the table had to get a little smaller. So, so this is now basically, I think it's a 23.5-inch table. I think this might be the one thing that I wish could be bigger, but it just can't. But there's still room here for 2 people to eat a meal. You're just gonna have to use slightly smaller plates, maybe kind of offset your plates a little bit. And then this seat still works great. You know, still my favorite place to hang out in this van. I think overall, this is an excellent van, and you combine this layout with the capability of all-wheel drive, and it's friggin' awesome. You know, would I rather have the extra space of the ProMaster? Sure, but maybe I'd rather have all-wheel drive. And that's kind of the trade-off. You know, and then of course there's a cost factor as well. The Mercedes is going to be significantly more. So that's kind of an overview, you know, of what it looks like if we take the same layout that we did on a ProMaster and we make it fit into a Sprinter. It's not an easy challenge, and not all layouts, you know, are, you know, will ever work. You know, it's only some will work. I think this worked out really well, and hopefully this video was helpful to help you understand a little bit of the sort of nuances of what it takes to try and do one layout in 2 different vans, because it's a little tricky. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching it. Have a good one. Peace.